Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing related tweets, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about the fantastic performance overall from Devin Haney beating Jo Jo Diaz. For me, it was 9 rounds to 3, maybe 8 rounds to 4, one of those two. Jo was always going to be food for Haney, in my humble opinion. I debated this on Twitter recently and people were saying to me it's going to be a real test for Haney. I didn't see that as a test. Landing the odd solid shot where Haney clearly doesn't like to be hit. We know that. There were question marks about his chin. That fight reinforced it for me. Jo Jo Diaz is a small lightweight. He's not really a lightweight. He's a blown up super featherweight. He's not a guy who is, in my humble opinion, certainly not a top 8 lightweight. Neither is Jorge Linares. I don't think that Haney has fought a top 8 lightweight. He may not have fought a top 10 lightweight yet. I mean, you've got Haney himself, of course. You've got Lomachenko. You've got Tank, Kambosos, Teofimo Lopez, Comey, Nakatani and Rivera, who I rate above him. And even then, and we're talking about ability rather than ratings here, right? Even then, does he definitely come in at 9th? I mean, would he beat Zepeda? Would he beat Isaac Cruz? Would he beat Rolly? You know, maybe he beats a couple of these guys. Maybe if he is top 10, he is just top 10. He's a blown up super featherweight. You've got, of course, Linares too, who he has fought Haney. So if Linares is better than him, then obviously that would mean he's fought somebody else in the top 10. So they're there or thereabouts on the peripheries, but they're not top level lightweights. And this is the reality that we have to be honest with when it comes to Devin Haney. Now, that's not to say he's not top level. He may very well be the best in the division. But it does show that there is a reluctance to take risks by some of these guys. I mean, Tank Davis is another one. Tank Davis has got that fight against Isaac Cruz coming up. It's questionable whether he's a top 10 lightweight. You've got this question mark about Tank as well, whereby he manufactures his way through the divisions. And we're seeing this a lot with a lot of these American supposed stars. And it's terrible for the sport of boxing. Shakur Stevenson called out George Kambosos, as did everybody after he beat Teofimo Lopez. Well, yesterday, Shakur Stevenson also tweeted to say, I've been tweeting Kambosos, but they're ignoring me. Shakur, listen, bro. He can't fight everybody that's calling him out. There's obviously a queue that's formed. So we have to ask, why has that queue formed? Kambosos is underrated, without a doubt. I've been saying this for a long time. But the fact that he's underrated means that he's not rated to his actual ability, which means that the majority of other fighters have seen him now take the titles. They think, oh, here's a soft touch. Let me try and take the belts off him. That's what's happened here. Because let's be honest, Stevenson, another elite level talent, you haven't even proved yourself to be the best in your own weight division. You've still got Oscar Valdez to fight. If you really want to prove that you're the best in the weight category, you would then fight Robson Conceição, because let's face it, most hardcore boxing fans felt that Conceição beat Oscar Valdez pretty comfortably. So to be the best in your division, you need to beat at least a couple of guys. Then you look to go up and dominate your division. But what people do is they find excuses for these fighters, and they'll say, oh, he's testing the waters, he's dipping his toes in, and then he'll come back down. What's that all about? That's navigation. That's not you trying to conquer. That's you trying to navigate, trying to manufacture a path. Beat the best guys in your weight category, then move up and start taking on the top lightweights. And if you really want to establish yourself as a top guy, yes, you may then get an immediate shot, fair enough. Or you might have to beat 1 or 2 men before you then get that shot, right? Let's be honest about this here. People are looking at Kambosos and a lot of them are thinking, I think this guy might be a soft touch, and they want a shot at it. And it's not all of the fighters, unfortunately, is the guys that are based out in the United States. Because Lomachenko, Comey, Nakatani, Kambosos himself, Teofimo Lopez is the one that breaks that trend in the US. These guys are taking risks. The rest of them seem to be taking on fighters that you sort of know the outcome beforehand. You know what's going to happen between Tank and Cruz. Let's be honest. You know what's going to happen before this fight. I mean, I knew anyway. A lot of people were sitting there talking about Jo Jo Diaz was going to test him. And I was saying on Twitter, I'm sorry, he's not. He's too short. He's going to struggle with the range. And listen, Haney made some mistakes, right? And he was caught. Like I said, that looping left hook was landing later on in the fight, and one of the reasons is because Haney was adamant on coming out with that Philly shell. Now when you're coming up against the Philly shell against a southpaw fighter, when you're up against an orthodox fighter, your back is to that backhand, so that wide hook isn't going to work as much because you simply dip your head below the shoulder and you've cut off the trajectory. Whereas when you're open to it, it's coming straight, he's got the whole body to aim at, right? So the angle isn't right, and that's why really you should change your guard. You should come behind a high guard. You have to change your stance when you are coming up against a guy who's a southpaw, if you're an orthodox fighter fighting out of a Philly shell. And he was eating those left hooks pretty flush. You could see he doesn't like to be hit by them. He was up against a blown up super featherweight. Had that been a big punching lightweight, he could have been in serious trouble. He was taking time to adapt. He had to start either changing his stance or at least start moving over to your own left to take the impact away from that hook. Instead, he was just holding the pocket at times and he was just being hit with it. So there were errors there from Haney. The other thing that Jo Jo Diaz had some success with early in the fight, he was barely doing anything, Jo Jo Diaz, but early in the fight, when he, from about the 4th round onwards, when he did start to try and up the tempo a little bit, he was slipping outside of the jab of Devin Haney, and he was throwing a left hand down the pipe, and that was landing at points. But ultimately, the distance control and the length of Devin Haney, he's very, very good at using it. He's a superb fighter, offensively speaking. He was able to nullify most of the things that Jo Jo Diaz wanted to do. He had a lot of success coming low and throwing that right hand straight down the pipe to the solar plexus. He used it too consistently in some regards, but because he was never punished for it, he had no reason to move away from that, right? But he should have been punished for it because it became so predictable, and Jo Jo Diaz was reading it, and you know he was reading it because when he had this high guard, when that shot was going to come in, you'd see him tense. You'd notice it a lot in between rounds on the slow motion. You'd see it live as well, but even on slow motion, go and see it. You'd see the moment he steps in, you'd see him tense and curl forward, expecting that shot into the solar plexus. Surely you've got to, at that point, either absorb the shot into the stomach and then come straight back with something to try and catch him on his way out, or throw with him, chop him right hand down, left hook, whatever it might be. As his head comes into play, you land something flush. Not only could you seriously hurt him because he's moving on to the shot in that regard, but you can then start to put him off from wanting to throw that punch, from wanting to come into that position. You start to make him more tentative. Jo Jo Diaz was very poor in my opinion. I do not buy this view that he's proved that he could hang with the top lightweights. He lost that fight 9-3 in my opinion, maybe 8-4. But although 9-3, 8-4 doesn't sound like it's that wide, it sounds like a comfortable win. But because the last couple of rounds, I think, may have gone to Diaz as he started to put his foot on the gas, in reality, Haney had built up a massive lead. So really, it was a comfortable win because unless he was to go on and stop him, he did get hurt in the 12th, Haney. But again, unless you're going to go on to stop him, you're pretty comfortable, and getting hurt, getting buzzed, doesn't mean you're close to being stopped. At no point was I watching Haney last night and thinking, oh, he could go here. So, we've got to start seeing these guys take some risks, or at least be honest about what it is that we're seeing. To the eyeball test, elite level skills. But he's not taking risks, and against a top lightweight who can punch, there are question marks there. That's my take on it anyway. Let me know what you thought of that particular fight and of the lightweight division in general. Another thing I'll say is George Kambosos loving himself in front of the media at the moment. He's doing the right thing, getting in there, getting his face out there. He does not want to appear to be a guy that's a flash in the pan, that a guy that was a fluke. He doesn't want that to come across that way. He needs to be there, his name there. So let's say he was to lose to Devin Haney, he still wants to be considered the guy, if he was competitive, that's right there, that people talk about, that people then say, fine, let's see Tank now in there with him, right? So he's doing the right thing. He does run a risk, because he's very popular at the moment. When you're in the public eye too much, however likable you are, some people do get bored of you. That's just a reality. It just happens. Now, whether it should happen or not is another question. I don't think it should happen. It's not his fault. He's trying to strike while the iron's hot, but it does. People get fatigued of seeing the same people in the public eye. One thing I did like is that post-fight, how alpha George Kambosos was in the post-fight interview outside the ring with Devin Haney, and Sergio Mora, when he said that he felt that Kambosos was the favourite. Devin Haney handled that well, and he said, well, listen, he's the one that's got the belt, so he should be, but we'll see what happens when we do fight. They both handled it well. But one of the things about Kambosos, because he's so alpha, you can see he walks in, he doesn't believe any lightweight can beat him. He's got that thing about him where he feels like, I'm going to find a way to smash these guys up. Because he's so aggressive with it, and despite that, humble at the same time and comes across like a nice guy, but there's this burning rage within him. I do wonder about the psychology of Kambosos. I mean, I've done a video already on the psychology of Kambosos. If you haven't seen that, please check it out. And I do think he has that warrior mindset. But the emotional aspect of the psychological analysis, rather than just the mental, the emotional element, if he was to ever get knocked out, spark out, how would he react? Because he's not a guy who, would he lose that alpha aura? Is he Deontay Wilder's lost that a bit. Do you know what I mean? He used to walk into a room and you'd feel like, okay, here's a heavyweight champ of the world that feels he can knock anybody out. He lost that a little bit after Fury. Now, Kambosos doesn't come across delusional like Deontay Wilder, or even as arrogant, certainly not. But that self-belief can still disappear. It didn't happen to Loma when he lost to Teofimo Lopez. He's kept that aura about him. But it's a psychological thing. It's this concept of self-belief. What would happen to Kambosos if he was to lose, say, in Australia in front of 80,000 against Haney, or against indeed anybody, as he keeps bringing up, in front of 80,000 crazy fans, you know? So that's interesting there. Let me know what you think about the division as a whole and what you made of Devin Haney's performance. Thanks for watching, everybody. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.